This is Brian Sweat, and I'm the product manager for ACCTivate. The ACCTivate Business Activity Management module is an add-on module that allows you to track projects, transactions, and data that maybe doesn't fit into a standard accounting transaction, such as a sales order or a purchase order. So we'll spend some time going through kind of the basics of business activities, and then also I'll obviously make time for a demo and go through the product and go through some advanced features. So for those of you that are already using business activities, maybe you'll get some tips and tricks as we go along. So just as a kind of brief introduction, it's good to recognize that ACCTivate, we like to think of ACCTivate as a hub for multiple modules and options and types of transactions that you do in your business. Includes a lot of the options you see on the screen here, such as sales, purchasing, shipping, collections, and customer management. The business activity module can tie into each one of those business functions within your company. Probably our number one use that we hear is people will use it for customer management, service management, and support of sales. But we also have some other uses of it, such as purchasing. So if you're dealing with vendors and you have a lot of information you need to track, that's more than just putting notes on a purchase order, you can use our business activity module for that. So this is just kind of a visual representation of some of the things we'll cover today and how to use the business activity management module. I'm often asked the difference between what is business activity and why don't we just use notes and reminders in ACCTivate. And so I've put together this comparison chart, and it's just a good comparison of the two. The main thing is the first line on this chart is that business activities should be thought of as projects, usually more than just a single task or a single to-do item. A note or a reminder can be used for a single follow-up, but when you're done with it, you mark it as done and you're finished. You don't need to track multiple status codes. You won't need to track emails and notes. So a business activity, I like to think of it as more of a project or a larger task. It is assigned to a person, which I think is important to get that concept. They can be reassigned, so you might have one user that works the project and then you pass it on to another user, but we do have a concept of a single assignment within ACCTivate. And the notes and reminders, you have a follow-up for a person, but there's really not a log or any way to progress the project through multiple people in the organization. Business activities allow you to track multiple email messages. You can send and you can also record received email into a business activity. You can also link multiple documents. And when I use the word document, I meant sales orders, sales quotes, maybe even a purchase order or some other transaction that's within ACCTivate. So again, a business activity becomes that hub. And then some common uses, we'll go through kind of a list on this next slide. These are just some suggestions and some ideas for you. We've got a lot of feedback from different customers, some creative uses of business activities, but these are the most common things that we hear from people. So again, customer service is probably the number one that I see, which includes at the bottom, I should have put those together, return merchandise authorizations, RMAs, taking care of problems with shipping, tracking a shipment. Maybe an item is broken when it arrives and you want to track that return. Again, RMAs are a really good use for that. Service repairs kind of are in that same group too. And we'll talk a little bit about service billing. It's a little more advanced use of business activities where you actually not only want to just record a project, but you also want to bill the customer for time and or materials. So we'll go through some of those examples as we jump in. Some of the basics to business activities in terms of how to set it up. There are ways to classify using codes and business activity types. And I'll show you some examples that'll make it a lot easier. But the prior slide where I give the list of different activity types would be considered business activity type. That's the actual word we use. Within that, for each type, you can create a subcategory of business activities, which we refer to as a code. So each group of business, such as sales and support, service, credit and collections, each business group within your company may have one business activity type or maybe more than one. And within that group, you'll actually set up codes to further categorize and classify the types of work you're doing. So for example, in our company, We have customer service as a activity type. Within code, we have tech support, implementation and consulting, custom reports like crystal reports. So we further categorize codes just as a way of tracking the type of work we do. And also within each business activity type, you have a resolution code. And that's really useful to track the outcome of a business activity, of a project or a task. So for our sales team, we'll have resolutions such as, completed the sale, maybe they went with a competitor, or maybe they, just decided not to do anything and they stayed with the current system they were on. So the resolutions are a way you can look back on history and look at the business activities and find out, kind of what you're doing and how things are working out. We use that for customer service as well. Instead of just marking tasks as closed or completed, it's nice to figure out what was the resolution. Did we handle it with a callback? Did we handle it via email? Did we solve their problem? Maybe we didn't solve their problem. Maybe it's a bug. Status is self-explanatory. We'll go through some tricks that you can use and kind of set up multiple statuses to track an in-progress business activity or even a closed business activity. So again, you can have a simple status called completed, but you may also want to have multiple statuses for completed. So one of them we have is no response, which means we've tried to reach the customer, but I never got a feedback. I never got a reply from them. It's not really a resolution. I don't know how we resolved it. There was no resolution, but the status is, no response. We'll get to it later. So status is a little more flexible than, open and closed. You can actually define custom status codes. Priority is the same way. I'd like to see some, definitely creative ways of using priority codes. The defaults and the way the demo company is set up, it's just, the low priority, normal, and urgent. We've also made some changes within our company, so we actually have named priorities. So are we giving you higher priority for a callback or for a sale because of some relation we have with you, or maybe you're a different type of partner or something like that. So priorities can be used to set the schedule of when you're going to get back with your customer or your vendor. It can also help to set the due date. As we move into the service billing, where you're actually doing service quotes and repairs, we have some advanced tools for that, and a really simple way to do it is we have an estimated time and amount, dollar amount. So on a business activity, if you think it's going to take an hour or 2 hours, it's just a real simple, easy way for you to quote the amount of time it's going to take to complete this task or this project. So we have estimated time and dollar amount you can use for a quote. Of course, you can always link a business activity to a proper sales quote, and I would recommend that if you're doing quotes that need to be printed out on a PDF or emailed. It's probably better to actually use a sales quote, but this is just a real simple way for managing your priorities and keeping up with the tasks. We also have some additional reference fields, which we'll talk about. You'll see them on the screen. It's pretty simple. Those are just free-form text. You can put anything you want in it. We talked about business activity type and code. So maybe you have a code to categorize the type of work, but you have a reference number or like a promo code they used or a coupon code or something, or maybe even let's say you have activity type customer service code would be shipping and tracking, but on the reference field you may actually want to put like the UPS tracking number or FedEx tracking number. So the reference fields become a little flexible and you can use those for advanced data capture. Dates are flexible. We have standard date fields. You can interpret them differently, but they're pretty self-explanatory. The open date, the system calculated due date, which you can override, but we have a default based on priority. So if the priority is urgent, you could set the due date to be same day. And then we also have a promise date, which allows you to override the due date and record in the system that you've promised to resolve this issue or work on the project by a certain date. So the promise date is kind of an above and beyond the due date. You can also record your next appointment with a customer or the vendor. And then, of course, once you close it, we'll actually capture the date it was first closed. And as we get to making changes to the above dates and making changes to reference fields, status codes, even bumping priority or lowering priority, we have an activity log. The log tab will show you every change made to one of the code lists. So if you change the actual priority, it will be logged with the user that changed the priority and the date and time they actually made the change. And that's really useful when you have a project that's assigned to you and you look at it and you're saying, why is this marked as urgent? Hopefully the user that assigned it to you will put notes on it, but if not, you can always look back and see who assigned it to you and when they changed the priority. So you can kind of see a nice little history there of the business activity. Just got a couple more slides here and we'll jump into Activate. Probably the most flexible part of business activities are that they can be linked to other transactions and entities within Activate. Some of the most popular activities I've seen are linked to customers. That's probably the most common, where you have a task or a project that's linked to a customer account. In addition to the customer, you could also link it to a specific sales order. So if you're trying to track shipment status on one order, you could create a business activity from the customer and then go ahead and link in the sales order or even multiple sales orders that they're asking about. And of course, I've just listed a list of items that you can link, such as products, vendors, POs, and even inventory transactions, such as a transfer or an inventory receipt. And lastly, and I will try to save time for this toward the end, we'll show you how to set up a custom link, a URL that links to a website or a web service or web app. Again, trying to stay on my example of a tracking issue with a UPS shipment. You may actually want to capture the tracking number in the business activity, but you could also, when you go to the website, the UPS site, and you search for it, for that tracking number, instead of having to open UPS's website manually and type in the tracking number, you can define a custom URL that will take you straight to the UPS site and track that package for you. This is kind of similar to what we do on our shipping workstation interface, but you can also do the same on business activities. An individual business activity can get lost in the shuffle if you had to write down every business activity reference number and go find them. So obviously we provided a way to manage the business activity list per user, and we call that the business activity review. We use that within our company. More than half of our staff lives by the business activity review. It gives us our task list, our to-do list every day. And for those of you that have been using it for a couple of years, I'll show you something that we've added that might also improve the way you're following up on business activities. And also, that can be auto refreshed, so you can just keep the window open all day and new activities will just appear on your business activity review. Business activity scheduling, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time in the demo on this. A lot of you are not using this. Activate's primarily for wholesale distribution. Scheduling is more going to be geared towards service companies. So I would say a lightweight dispatch board. Dispatch board is it's a way of scheduling tasks to be done by service technicians, service reps, or you could even use it for sales leads if you want to have just a kind of a manager's view of all the business activities and reschedule and reassign business activities easily. And so again, it lets you change the status easily and change who it's assigned to. Okay, and the last thing we'll talk about as a more advanced business activity tool is the billing wizard. Honestly, most companies I've talked to over the years on this are actually billing each business activity one at a time. But we do offer the ability to do a monthly or weekly billing for all the service work that's been performed under business activities. We use that within our company. I probably worked with 2 or 3 other customers over the years that are really using this well. So once you kind of master it, it's actually a nice tool, and it allows you to generate hundreds of sales or service orders and invoices very easily based on your service reps or your sales reps entering time and materials throughout the month or throughout the week. So again, Billing Wizard's just a way to do a batch process of billing all time and materials for a time period. Okay, as we get started with Activate, everything you see today will be as a part of the business activity add-on module. That's a minimum add-on, just to reiterate. So when you launch Activate, if you still have the business activity review and scheduling, you may have these icons, but they're disabled and they're grayed out. So the first thing I'd like you to do if you're an existing user is go ahead and you can go to the Help menu and choose View Current Users, and you can look at the Licensed Options tab, which will show you are you licensed for business activity tracking. Definitely take a look at this and see if you have business activity tracking. If so, maybe you're licensed but you just haven't configured it yet, and let us know if you've got any questions and we can help you set that up. Also, later on, we'll talk about business activity scheduling, which is an additional add-on module. So the business activity tracking is basic project management without the dispatch board. If you want to do the dispatch, that's going to be business activity scheduling. And then finally, if you want to do the billing where you record time and materials, that's actually another add-on module that we can talk to you about. And if you'd like to see a more in-depth demo and see how it works for your company, definitely let me know. Okay, so the first thing we'll do as you log into your company, the default configuration I have in the demo company, it opens the business alerts, which allows you to look at reminders and notes for individual transactions, such as a customer, product, purchase order, that type of thing. These are not business activities, these are just notes. Very simple, single line. As that comparison showed earlier, they're assigned to one user with a single due date, and you simply mark it as completed by checking the box. So it's very lightweight. There's no status codes, there's no emails and additional notes related to it. If I want to go into business activities, I can jump right into the activity window and I'll show you what that looks like. Mine's set to, it's maximized right now, but I'll make it a little smaller so it might be easier to read. These can be resized. As I went through on the slides, you have the business activity ID number at the top. So when I choose new, the system will automatically assign an activity ID. Those numbers are set up in configuration management, so you'll be able to get to that and configure whatever type of number system you want. Within our company, we just actually up until today we've used a 5-digit number. I think we will hit 100,000 this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So we'll actually be adjusting from 5 digits up to 6. So make sure you choose your IDs wisely where they can they can handle the volume of your business. Years ago when we started, I guess we never thought we'd get past 100,000. I don't know why, but it's just something to keep in mind. Once we choose type here, you'll see these are the types of business units you have in your company. Usually they are a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 per group. So customer service, RMAs may go together. So you might have some people in your company that just use 2 activity types. You may have somebody who's a manager or an executive who actually looks at all the different types. So that business activity type is going to set the standards for status codes, priorities. All the other codes are dictated by business activity type. So the way you track activities within your group does not have to be the same as another group within your company. So again, the RMA tracking is very different than sales opportunities. I'll start a real simple example. We'll start off as customer service. Below that, we have the code drop-down, which is, again, a way to classify types of projects and tasks within one group. So for customer service, we've got a couple here that we've got in our demo company. These are user-defined in configuration management. I'll show you quickly how to set up new codes. But I definitely would really think this through. One of the things that we've seen in our company, and I've actually seen other customers as well, you start adding codes for anything you think of, even before you need it. And it might become confusing to your customers and your users in terms of what code to use. And so I actually see a lot of people, they choose the wrong code because they're not sure how to classify a task. So maybe try to keep them pretty broad and start out with just a few, and then grow that list as you really need to segregate the list. So we'll do a shipment missing. That's the example I keep using about a tracking number for a sales order. I've started a business activity just from scratch by using the activity window. There are other ways to do business activities, which we'll show you in a few minutes. The default is that it is not assigned to any customer service rep. If you choose the drop down here, these are not sales reps. These are actually end users within Activate. So these are the people that use Activate. If you have additional people that you need to assign tasks to, but they don't use Activate, you can set them up here, but Activate's really designed, and business activities are designed where you would actually assign it to the Activate user. So if you assign it to a service rep and they're not using the system, it may be more difficult for you to stay on top of it. So you might set up a service manager, and all his tasks for his group are assigned to him, and then he doles out tasks to the actual reps that maybe don't use Activate. Of course, we'd recommend that all of your service reps try to use Activate, so that would be the ideal way to do it. Okay, so I will give this to Floyd Harris, who happens to be myself. And the default status is configurable. I set this up today to default to the new status, which I guess means it needs to get reviewed. We haven't talked to the customer yet. We just got a phone call in, and we need to record this in the system. So we'll just just keep it as all the default. On the three boxes in the middle are a way of just describing this business activity. This first on the left, called the description, is actually pretty large, and I would recommend you actually keep that to 1 line or 2 lines max, because it's a lot more visible with just a very short description that explains the problem. So let's just say package never arrived. Okay, and then in the discussion, this is more or less the notes, maybe the customer or the vendor, kind of what you're overall talking to them about. And down at the bottom we have the related items. This list is this is kind of a pretty key function here. It lets you link the business activity to the customer and or sales order or anything else within Activate. So you'll hit the add button and a pop-up will appear that gives you a list of everything, every type of link that you can create for a business activity. So in this case, we'll actually just link it to the original customer. And this customer is Abercrombie & Smith, my favorite customer in the demo company. Got a little message here. They're over their limit. We have please forward calls to Jim. Okay, we should put a note in there for that. But you'll see down here at the bottom, we see the company, customer's ID and company name. And then if there's any contracts or any service contracts, you'll see those available with an exclamation point. And that's from the customer window on the contracts, the prices and contracts tab. We have a contract with them that's been expired, and we need to follow up with them on that. Over on the right, we have the contact list. So within this organization, Abercrombie & Smith, in Activate, we've tracked 5 different key contacts for that customer. In this case, I've set one up with my own email address just for illustrating emails. Let's say Christy actually called in, and she's the one that asked about the shipment. And you can see here their address. And I talked about this to a few people. A lot of people don't notice this. They're not sure. They're nervous about clicking buttons. The map button is really useful on this, because when a customer calls, a lot of us don't really think to kind of see where they're at. And maybe if it's a shipment issue, maybe you should take a look at the Google Maps Street View, or kind of figure out what they're talking about. So when when the guy tells you, or the woman in this case tells you that you were supposed to ship it to the side dock, it never arrived. This is a really nice way of, oops, my Outlook is open. You can just drill down and actually look at their business. So in this case, I can actually just hit the map button. It'll open my browser and take me right to that address. Although my computer is taking its time here. And if the company's actually at that address, you'll see it'll actually pull it up right here. So if I can go to Street View, of course, everyone's seen that. Probably don't need to spend a lot of time on that. But it's a nice way to kind of wow your customers and really take a look at where they're at, and maybe talk to them. That Jamba Juice is next door. Be like, yeah, maybe the UPS guy stopped next door at Jamba Juice for a drink. I don't know. You could make something up, but it's just kind of a nice way to identify with your customers. So that's the map button. We also use the QuickBooks freeform address format. So sometimes these addresses, you might need to override the address. I'm not sure why that's not copying. I ran into that last night. So you can override the address and type anything you want. If it turns out that's the wrong address, maybe record it here. But The reality is, if you have the wrong address for the customer, I'd rather you drill down and fix it on the customer record. So this is just an override. So maybe this task is going to have to do with that address, but we don't want to change the customer's address. So I don't know. It's just something to mention. You can override the address. The note is a note for the relation of this business activity to this customer. We also have a full notes tab, which lets you record time-stamped, actual dated notes for the project. But if you want to put a note on maybe what's their relationship to this activity, you could put a note in here. So I'd just say Christy is key contact for this tracking issue. Okay, we can save it. Had two questions on contracts, just to kind of show you where that's at. No, we're not going to spend a lot of time on customer management today, but I will show you what you can have appear there. Sorry, I double-clicked on it again. It's actually on the Prices tab. We have all of our special prices with a customer, and then over on the left, it's a little hidden, but you can click on Contracts, and this is where you would manage any service contracts or warranties you have with that customer. So in this case, we had a contract that expired just a month ago. If I want to extend that so it's covers them at least for another week, I can change that, and then when I come back here, you'll see that it's no longer red, and it shows that they're still under contract and that contract's still visible. Okay. Okay, another thing we can do is you don't have to link just one customer. So you can also link in the original sales order. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to choose Add Sales Order to the link, and I'm going to go back and find, if I sort by name, I can find any open sales order for Abercrombie & Smith. And you'll find here there's an order from back in March that's still marked as open. It has not been closed. And let's say that's what they called in about. I can pull that up, and it adds a link from the business activity to both the customer and a specific sales order number. And that original order, it pulls the contact name and phone, fax, and email if there was one from the sales order. Okay, now that I've saved that, another thing I can show you here is you can drill down to actually open that related record by just simply double clicking on it. Okay, and that's just going to open the sales order window and find out what's going on with it. And as you'll see here, the status is back ordered, which I guess explains why they never received the last shipment here. On the Activities tab, because I just generated a business activity for the sales order, so on each transaction that's linked, you'll actually see a list of any business activity that's related to this transaction. So it's kind of a two-way link. So if you're on the business activity, you'll see the order. If you're on the order, you'll see the business activity. And the same is true for the customer. On the Activities tab on the customer window as well, you'll see that new business activity. I can come here and I'll see the UPS tracking. So we did ship that first order, and if the customer tells you, well, we never received anything, you can hit Track Package on the toolbar here. If it's UPS or FedEx, we'll actually get the URL that will take you to the tracking page. That is a bogus tracking number, so it doesn't actually work. It does just illustrate the fact that you can simply click into it. You don't have to type it in anywhere, and I can copy that URL and just keep track of that on my notes. Or if I want to get the tracking number, I could paste that in the reference field as well if I wanted to track that here. Okay. So on to the next thing. Now that, let's say I'm Floyd Harris, so I've actually done some research. I may want to move it into the open status, meaning that it's no longer new. I've worked on it, so I've kind of moved it along within our workflow. On the Notes tab, I definitely recommend that you add a note, which is a single click on the toolbar button or Control L if you want to look at the shortcut keys. And this will put a timestamp. It automatically puts today's date and time and allows you to type in a note. So, and I would just say, checked on sales order. You can copy and paste that. So you can put a note, and you can just save it as is, or as we talked about earlier, the business alerts and reminders. If I want to say I need somebody to follow up on this, I can assign someone tomorrow. Let's let Pamela user PS will actually follow up with that tomorrow. And let's say I put a time in here like 10 a.m. Okay, so this business activity is still assigned to Floyd Harris myself, even though I've asked Pamela Smart to follow up on it. So when she opens her business activity, her business alerts, when she launches ACCTivate, she'll see a note that will take her back to this business activity and explain, kind of what's going on, and she'll actually see this note as well. Also, we have email tracking. So I can send an email to the customer, and I can also record any emails that came into the system. So let's just start off with, I know this is kind of strange, from Brian to Brian, but I'll just generate a little quick email. And I might want to set up message templates. And these are a little beyond the scope of basic business activities, but I'll quickly set one of these up for you. So instead of having to hand key, like if you were in Outlook, you would actually have to type up the subject, type in an email address, and type out the whole message. We definitely recommend you look at the business activity email message templates. So I can click templates. I don't have any set up yet, so I'll go to manage message templates. I'll choose new, and I'll call this tracking request. And we'll send it from brian@alterity.com because I'm the master tracking representative. And we'll call it Southwestern Industries tracking. And this is where message templates are kind of nice and powerful because you can fill in data fields from the business activity into the body or the subject of the message. So in this case, I'm not going to read the help files because I already know how it works, but you can actually hit F1 and go to our help system. It'll actually show you the list of field names that you can use for defining these email message templates. So we'll do contact name, and just write up a little personal message. So our records show that package UPS tracking number. And again, this is where I said I was going to use the reference field, so I'll just put the word reference. Okay, it's real simple. And the business activity needs to be the type of email message template. This is for business activity, so I'll choose activity. And you can also make it available for all users, but I'll just keep it simple for myself right now. So I've got tracking request. If I go back to the business activity, this is where I put in let me see if I can make a more reasonable tracking number there. Okay, so I put the tracking number here. The email will go to the email address on file, and the contact name will be addressed. So I can choose email, and then I can choose from the template, choose tracking request, and it will say, hi, Christy Abercrombie, and it'll actually fill in, as I explained, kind of like a mail merge in Microsoft Word. It'll include the tracking number automatically for their records. So it's just a real simple way to send an email. So let's try to send that. Okay, and after that message is sent, you'll see on the email tab, activate it within our database. This is not within Outlook. It's actually in both. It will be in Outlook, and it will also be within ACCTivate. So let me switch to Outlook real quick, and we will just make a response here. Okay, so this is from myself, but let's say that we got a reply from Christy. Just a real simple email. So as that message appears, Microsoft Office 365 is going to fail me, but it doesn't matter. You can actually drag and drop those emails into the business activity. So hit Edit on the business activity, go to the Email tab, and then we can come over here and grab that message that was sent back to us from Christy Abercrombie, and I can drag and drop it into the business activity email tab, and it will capture that email response that I got back from my customer. So it's a good way to, of course this is also in Outlook, Or somebody asked about Thunderbird. I'm glad you did because I actually use Mozilla Thunderbird. So it does work with Thunderbird, but I always show Outlook because most people understand that a little more. So you can capture the email sent back to you from the customer, drag and drop it, and then that will keep a copy of this for all other Activate users that have permission to get to business activities. So it's a good way of sharing that information rather than forwarding emails or printing them out or saving them as a file. It's a really nice way to do that. I think email is still very personal, and of course, my coworkers don't have access to my inbox. So this is a good way for us to share data between each other. And you can always redisplay it within Activate just by double-clicking it. We will pull out the text of the message and put that into our database. But we also store the original email message as an attachment to the message that you pulled into Activate. So you can double click on this MSG file and it will open it back up in Outlook. Okay. Now, since I've sent this off to them, now I'm kind of needing to follow up with UPS. I'll change the status now again to needs more information, and we'll keep that as it is for now. Now, again, if I'm a manager or a coworker of Floyd's and I want to take a look at what's going on with this business activity, I will now see the discussion, no resolution, the status is needs more information. The first thing I usually will tell people to do is go to the Notes tab and find out what kind of notes have happened, and then look at email and see if there were any communications with a customer. But lastly, you may also want to look at the log, and this is the history of the business activity, and will show all changes with the exception of the discussion notes, like the text notes. So you'll see all the codes at the top of the screen. Anytime any of those values are changed, you'll actually see it here as well. So we'll see here in the last 20 minutes or so, we've gone from a new request, we changed it to open, then we set the reference field to that tracking number, and then we later changed the status from open to needs more information. And of course, you may even want to go one step further. Now, this is a pretty advanced tool. I have not seen a lot of people use it, but it's available. If let's say you're Floyd Harris and you want to put a note on why you changed the status, rather than putting the note as a general just timestamp note, it's often useful to go ahead and put it right here where that was logged. So I don't see what's wrong. Let's call UPS. So maybe that's why it's there. So I can go to the Notes tab, and I'll put a reminder for myself. And I'll choose a follow-up. Let's just give it to myself here. And then we'll mark this other one as completed. Let's say that Pamela looked into it, and she agrees that, yes, we did ship the product. Okay, so now the business activity is marked as need more information. The open note, the one that's not checked as completed, says that I need to call UPS for tracking. So if I close out of the business activity, I know that I'm not going to lose track of it because it's in our system and it's not going to get deleted or go away. And I guess that's one side note. You cannot delete a business activity. There's no way to do it within Activate. When we first launched the product in 2003, I think, we did have a delete button. It said, "Are you sure?" but it allowed you to delete. We had a number of customers, and even within our company, we actually deleted a few, and it's pretty bad to lose an entire project. So the only way to get something out of your system is to mark it as closed and or reclassify it or recategorize it. But we do not offer a delete, and I'm probably not going to do that in the future. I think we've had enough. We don't want things disappearing, so we'll deal with that. So I can go to business alerts now. If I were to log back into Activate, you'd see this here that I had a follow-up. So we have the business alerts can be used in combination with business activity. So earlier I talked about the difference between a note and an activity. An activity is a project or a task that's going to involve multiple statuses or steps. But you can also use notes on a business activity. So business alerts are individual follow-ups that can be for a business activity or a direct customer or a sales order. So this is just one way you can manage this. So I can hit View Selected Item on the toolbar or double-click the item in the grid, which will just take me back to that business activity. I still have a pop-up note, so anytime anything is displayed for this customer account, Abercrombie, I have a pop-up note that appears. That's why we saw that. and I still have the drill down capabilities for the sales order. So we can get back to that really easily. But I'm going to go one step further now. So we started off with business alerts linking us to the business activity. Now I'm going to kind of show you, I think, a better tool for people that work in business activity review. Business activities all day, or it's a big part of their job. I would encourage you to use the business activity review. The review panel is a way, again, it's very individual. So each user can have their own set of columns and their own views. And ACCTivate will remember those settings for each session. So when you log out of ACCTivate and you log back in, it'll keep track of your settings, your personal settings. So this is just kind of a default view. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little larger. This is usually a pretty large screen tool. Again, for Floyd Harris myself, I don't really treat priorities. I don't use the priority codes very much. So if I want to get rid of that column, I can click the word priority and hold my mouse down and just drag it off of the grid. Either above or below, and just let go of it. And when I do that, it'll take that data out of the screen, because by default there's a lot of data here, and it's probably too much for every user, but it's a good starting point. And let's say that I don't care who opens a task, I can get rid of that column. The contact name is pretty important, so we'll leave that here. Resolution. Just kind of work this up a little bit. Now the other thing I can do in business activities, I can group different types of business activities by, you'll see above the grid here it says drag a column header here to create a group. So I can actually click the word type and I can drag it above the grid, and you'll see these red arrows appear that show that it will group all your business activities by the type. Now, you may not want to do that if you, the user, only works in one type of activity, but if you've got a lot, this is a really nice tool for that. And then within that, you can sort, it defaults to sorting it alphabetically, but within each group, you can choose to sort by due date, which is the default, or you could sort by anything else, such as the date opened, or even the last action, which we'll explain in just a minute. Okay, so this is our the example we've been using, the shipment missing, which again is is definitely something we want to get onto. You've got enough information here. You could at least call them and see if you can get her on the phone, or do light follow-ups. But usually the way you do it is you keep this screen open and then you double-click in the grid, or you choose View Activity or Control O to open the business activity. So you can just do Control O. That will take me right to the business activity. Now I'm in full screen mode, which again is a kind of a one at a time type approach. But you can have more than one business activity open at a time. That's very different than QuickBooks, where each type of window you can only have open at one time. I've seen some of our guys on support team, even in sales, have 2 or 3 activities open at a time. They're taking notes on one, but one of them went to the background just for a few minutes, and they'll bring it back up. So we can definitely manage multiple activities at once. So as I work through the activity review, I may change the status to urgent, which shows the next thing we can do. So scheduling activities, priority is the key driver to setting the due date. So as I changed, my default is normal, which is due in 1 day, but when I change it to urgent, it's due in 2 hours. So it adjusts the due date to be based on the actual date opened, based on our configuration management. How many hours do you want it until it's actually due? From that point, I can say that the due date is 2 hours, but I'm going to go ahead and promise it to her by 5 p.m. today, because it's unnecessary for her to get a response within 2 hours. So I went ahead and changed that. My due date, my due time is now adjusted based on the promise. Promise overrides the due date. A promise and appointment are both optional, but it's just a good way to remember a task, and you can set that and use your business activity review to actually look at the appointment dates. So I'm going to close back out of this and get back to the business activity, which should refresh in just a sec. Because I hid the priority column, I can't see it anymore, but now I actually want to use priorities. So if I want to bring a column back, you'll need to click the word columns on the toolbar, and then you'll have a pop-up window that appears, and these are fields that are not on the business activity review by default, but you can put them back on. So I can just click the priority and I can drag and drop it somewhere within the business activity review. So now I'll see the word urgent on my screen. Now, again, you can regroup, resort at any time. It just remembers the last setting that you had when you close and reopen it. So let's say that instead of grouping by type, I want to manage by priorities. I can just drag and drop priority, and it will group all my normal priorities and then my urgent one in a separate group. And of course, if you don't like the way that's sequenced, you can click the word priority, and it will resort it to be in the opposite reverse sequence, the urgent at the top. Okay. One thing that you'll see on the business activity review is the last action date, the last action user, and what the last action was. This is just a good way at a glance to look at all the activities and see what's going on. So last action date is the most recent note, email, or I guess note, email, or follow-up that you've had on that business activity. So if I send an email, you'll actually see that it is absolutely by minute, by timestamp. So this will keep up with kind of the last thing that you've done on it. So today, the last thing on this is a follow-up to call UPS for tracking. So as I do that, as I make that call, I can again drill down. I know I'm going back and forth here, but there's a lot of interaction here. So as I go here, let's say that I did call UPS. I can mark that one off as completed. I can hit Control L or hit note on the toolbar, and then I can add a new note saying UPS said the package was delivered. They will email the signature confirmation. Okay, and I'll put a follow-up in maybe for 2 days just to check in, make sure we've got that. But I do need to call her back by 5 o'clock today, so I'll just put a note in to check on UPS later, and then we'll put a note in. And at this point, I'll probably just call Christy, so I'll say, okay, just put a note in, no follow-up on that, just mark that off as done, and okay, so we're done with that. So now if I look at the last action on this, you'll see it's not a follow-up anymore. The last action was the note that happened to call Christy to explain that UPS says package arrived. And the follow-up will still be in my business alerts, but it is absolutely the last thing that was done on that business activity. So business activity review is pretty powerful. I think once you got to put your hands on it and use it to really understand everything you can do. But you can everything at the top of the screen is for filtering. So if I only want to look at customer service, I can choose that. Let's say if I just want to look at sales opportunities, I can do that as well. The status is default to only show open business activities, but you can definitely, if you just want to look at closed activities, you can do that as well. These are only closed assigned to me, which I don't have any, but you can definitely filter that. Also, you can filter on multiple dates. So go ahead and look through these date filters. You can filter to only show activities that were opened around a date range, either before a date or more recently than a date. You can also filter on due date, which is kind of useful as well. So if you've got things pushed way out in the future, you might want to have this filtered to be due on or before today. Okay. There's also an auto refresh. This is when it's maximized, it's hard to see, but usually refresh and this are pretty close together. The default is to just set it to refresh every, I think, 5 minutes, but I've changed it to 1 minute. It'll keep track of whatever your settings are per end user. So each actual login to Activate gets their own auto refresh setting. So if you're just a manager and you're looking at it, and every once in a while I'd probably set it to 15 minutes, just so it's faster and it's not hitting the server unnecessarily. And the look for is a really nice, quick way to filter a list. So if you want to filter on anything that's got the word Abercrombie in it, you can just type Abercrombie and it'll filter the list quickly. Rather than sorting and searching, if you've got hundreds or thousands of activities, it's a lot more difficult to manage. So the look for is just a quick way to filter it. So if your guy calls in, if Christy calls in, you could just type Christy and you'll see any business that has the word Christy and either the contact, the related item, the description, codes, anything that's a text field. That was mostly kind of my introduction to business activities. Now let's go through a couple transaction scenarios where we'll show you time and materials and also how to schedule tasks out for service. What we did so far was the most basic, easy way to create a business activity where we started with the activity screen, but that's often not the best way to do it. In fact, I would recommend for what we just did, I know it's a little more complicated, but I wouldn't go straight to the business activity window. I would actually go to the original sales order and create a new activity from that sales order. So let's use a different example now, and I want to find an order that we shipped to Abercrombie last December. And it happens to be, I've got the notes here, so we'll pull it up. This was for, it was an order that shipped for just a small item, some copy paper and a shipping charge last year. Now, let's say that paper was damaged or something. They opened it up and there was a watermark or some damage on it. So what I recommend for, and the same applies to purchase orders, customers, other windows within Activate, there's a create button here which lets you create a new activity, which I think it's for every screen that has it, it's Control-Shift-A for activity. Control-A is select all, so Control-Shift-A is our shortcut for creating a new business activity automatically linked to this sales order. So I can do Control-Shift-A, and that opens up a new business activity that's automatically linked to that sales order. And so at this point, let's say our problem was with this red copy paper, and we're going to choose a different type. Instead of customer service, we'll actually choose RMA because this is a problem. It was a quality issue with the paper we delivered. We need to actually make it right and ship them some replacement paper. So anyways, we'll just put a little description here. Again, short and sweet is the rule here. I definitely recommend something that's easy to see in a list. So we'll say copy paper was damaged. We'll link it to the customer as well, just so I can get that link. And let's say this time the guy who called in was Bill Jackson. So we'll just say, talk to Bill. He was upset with the it sat on shelf for a while but was damaged. I don't know. Just put a note in there, and the discussion can get quite large. You can put as much notes as you want. You can maximize it so you'll have more room. Technically, I think it's like 2 GB is the max. So you put as much discussion notes as you want. The code will this is not a delivery issue for a return. This is a quality issue. So we just have 2 codes, and you'll notice those are not the same codes that we had for our customer service group. The status is new. That is one thing I do kind of like to use. I like to use kind of a uniform status codes as much as possible. That way a manager or an executive that wants to look at all the activities in the business, that lets them easily filter down in their business activity review to just see everything that's new across the entire organization. Now once you get into individual task steps, statuses, you may want to tweak that per group, but for the most part, try to use kind of the standard verbiage within the company. So let's skip right from new to pending, and we need to get more information, of course, and we need to make sure that we're going to accept this return. So the notes, again, I recommend in addition to business activities, you still want to use a note. So I just timestamp that, talk to Bill, need to review with manufacturer. Okay. So just put a note on, and this is going to be assigned to Floyd because I do everything. I'm Floyd Harris. That's my job, everything in the company. So we'll go back to discussion. So now we've linked it to the customer and the sales order, but I need to find out, who do we buy this product from? So I can drill down from the business activity back to the sales order, and then from here I can drill down to the product. So I don't have to rekey anything. I can just click and use shortcut keys to get straight to that product and find out who the vendor is and what happened with that shipment. So I can go to the vendors tab here and see that, oh wow, we've bought from multiple vendors. Turns out our preferred vendor is Adams Paper, but the last PO was from Berkeley, which is actually the shipment that we shipped that order from. So because this RMA is linked to the sales order, I may also want to link it to the vendor. So I can go ahead and put that in Berkeley Paper. Okay, so now I have a link to the vendor. I've got the vendor link in the customer and the sales order. Now if I go into the history here on the product, I'll see that purchase order, PO 1191. I can link it to the purchase order as well. So I can choose add purchase order, and it's actually completed. So I'm going to switch that to all. And you'll see the PO link here as well, which is kind of redundant. I mean, you don't have to link it to the vendor customer in order. A lot of times I'll see they'll just have a link to the sales order and then just have a link to the vendor PO, and that's all you need, because that's going to tie it all together for the most part. Now, the reason why you might want to link the customer, I do need to mention that. It's a little different because on the customer window, if you link it to the customer, you'll see on their activities tab, you'll actually see a list of every business activity. So the customer window does not show business activities linked to transactions. It only shows business activities linked to the customer. That's something we've had as an enhancement. Maybe we'll do in the future, but as of Activate 8.0, we don't have that available today. So just be sure you link the customer if it's going to have to do with that customer. Okay, so I've got the sales order, I have the vendor PO, and let's say we've reached out to the vendor and they recognize the problem. So talk to Berkeley. Okay, so go ahead and put that note in. Now, there's a lot more you can do with an RMA. I'm going to do kind of a basic, more or less something I might recommend. Maybe we want to just go ahead and ship, provide a credit for the original order and then do a new shipment, new sales order from Berkeley straight to Abercrombie. Now, there are additional options. You can use the time and materials tab if you have the service billing, but in most cases, time and materials are used for service work, not for RMAs, not for returns. So I actually recommend, I know you can try to use that, it'll work, but I actually recommend that you use a proper credit memo and a proper sales order if you can. So from the business activity, we'll go ahead and create a new credit memo, and we'll provide, you select the customer. That's one thing I thought I had done. So you do have to have it linked to a customer to create the credit memo. Again, why we want to link it to the customer always. So we'll choose credit memo first, and we'll go ahead and give them, got a lot of pop-up notes, we'll give them credit for the CP 2003. Okay, and we'll go ahead and give them credit for the 2 reams they bought. And you've got the original sales order linked, so if you wanted to go back and see that we charged them $3.95 a ream, actually that's the wrong product, there we go. So we'll give them credit for the 2 reams at $3.95, and then let's say we're going to go ahead and ship the remaining product. So you can do one of two things. You can actually create a credit memo, and I'm going to do the most formal, proper way to do it, but I will show you, or I guess I'll talk to you about it. You can just create a new sales order, and on the single sales order, you could have one line for the credit and one line for the reshipment. So I'm going to talk about this, and then I'll show you the other way as well. So in this case, we would give credit to Abercrombie for the $7.90. Go ahead and create their credit with today's date. I'm not going to backdate this to last year. We've already closed the books, so we're going to keep that revenue at the original date, and we'll go ahead and put the credit in at today's date. And Crystal's taking a while to load, but you get the idea here. We've got the credit memo linked. Now, the reason I like to show the more formal way, I'll go back to this. When we go to the business activity, we'll now see the original order, and then we'll see the credit memo as well. So you've got kind of all the transactions linked together, so we don't lose track of anything. Okay, so now I've provided credit to the customer, and I can go ahead and have the product shipped to them again. Now, in this case, it may be easier to just copy the order so you can kind of ship the same thing again. So I'll just do that real quick. And yes, it should be for the same customer. And we'll change it to ship overnight, kind of bump their priority next day air. And I guess one thing I might want to change here is instead of shipping it from our inventory, which is going to take a while because we'll have to order it from the vendor, I'll actually drop ship this straight from the vendor. So it'll get there a little faster, and I'll pay the freight to have the vendor ship it. And we will not charge the customer any shipping charges. Okay. Now, in this case, I'm charging the customer. I probably should do a 100% discount on this. I don't really want to show this as a discount, as a trade discount. So instead of putting the discount at the bottom of the order, I'm going to go ahead and just write off the line item, so I don't book any revenue at all for this. It'll just be a $0 credit memo. Okay, so go ahead and you do have to create an invoice to just close the order. Although it's going to be for nothing, but you should show this to the customer if you want. So the 2 reams, 100% discount, $0 amount. So we'll send that to them. Now I need to ship this, straight to the customer. So I would also need to go ahead and do the I need to actually do the drop ship purchase order. You can do that from the sales order. If I kept that open. And 8.0, this is actually new in 8.0. If you're not on 8.0 yet, I can choose create dropship PO. Never mind. We'll have to look into that. So I'll have to go to Dropship Wizard on that. We already completed the order. So we'll have the dropship item here. I can go ahead and create the purchase order for the vendor. Okay, that way I can issue the PO now and email that to the vendor as well. So missed a step there. Sorry for that. Little rough, but I should have gone through that a little slower. So we've got the original purchase order and the sales order and the credit memo now linked. Again, like I said earlier, you can do a RMA as a business activity, and you can do it all in one. I think if you're going to do that, though, just go straight with a sales order rather than a credit memo. So you have to choose the customer, choose sales order, and what you can do on this is actually do the return product first and go ahead and return, because on a sales order you can actually do a negative quantity, which is kind of a nice way to handle that. So we would return, give them credit for the 2, and then actually ship back the additional 2 straight from the warehouse from the vendor. But anyways, I'm kind of missing some things here. I need to go in more detail with you. When you do the credit, I actually return it back into inventory and I ship from dropship. So I probably would not have done that against inventory. So now in the RMA, you can also link in, any of the other inventory transactions. So if you're waiting on the receipt of goods or whatever, you can do that. If it was a return and then you need to receive that back into inventory, you could link that RMA as well. If you need to bring it in and then process like an assembly because it has to go through some recertification process or refurbishment, you could also link that here and generate that assembly transaction, which is again kind of advanced, but we're trying to go through this. Okay. All right, so RMAs are pretty simple. It's just a way to link a sales order and a credit memo, or maybe just the sales order if you're going to drop ship more items, which is actually what I was meant to show you at the end, is just do a sales order. In that case, we would just ship them additional product and let them keep the damaged product. So the first one was where you took back the damaged product as a credit memo, and then you went ahead and shipped them more product. The second example, you just go straight to a sales order, ship them additional product, but don't ever do a credit memo, just do it at 100% discount. Okay, once you're done with that, let's say you can mark it through the statuses of authorized, and if I did have a multi-user system here, you would see who authorized it as well. So it's important to log in as your user ID when you're making these changes. And then finally, once you've shipped the new product and confirmed the customer's happy, you'll mark it as status closed, and the resolution would be the customer's happy, so it's satisfactory. So the resolution again is a way to, I guess, classify the way you close the business activity. So it's a way of tracking, whether you did a good job or you upset the customer, or it's a way of tracking the end result. Maybe you'll set up a resolution code on an RMA called vendor shipped replacement part, or vendor replacement, or maybe you'll have one called refurbishment or an exchange. So you can use resolution for additional ways to close the business activity. I don't think a status makes sense for those, because you wouldn't have a status of exchange. Exchange is more or less how you handled it. It's not where it is today, right now. Okay. So again, that's kind of a basic RMA. Talk to our implementation team about your exact needs, but basically, you have a simple description, the overall discussion, and then you have the resolution code, which is satisfactory in our case, and then over here, maybe you'll put in the actual resolution notes. So vendor shipped and maybe I follow it up with customer, they're happy. You just put a note there. Okay, and you'll see here it actually timestamped the date and time that I closed it, the user that closed it, and you'll just have this kind of information message at the top, which will show either if it's still open, how long it's been open, or when you close it, it'll track how many minutes, days, or even years it took to close the project. We don't ever see years in our company. It's always number of days, right? Okay, so from that business activity, again, just to reiterate, the create button is pretty powerful as a way to create new transactions linked to this business activity. So you can have an RMA linked to both the original order that we found the problem to be with, and you can also link a new sales order to repair or replace or drop ship a new item to them. You can also create another business activity that comes as a result of this. So let's say we have the RMA business activity. We close that today on June 26th, but I want to follow up with them in 30 days. So I think, just as a nice proactive way for customer service, I may want to create a new business activity with a follow-up, and let's call it customer service, and we'll just, quality issue, and we'll put that out to be due in 30 days. So I'll just choose roughly next month. So follow up from RMA. We don't want to lose their business. So just put that in there, and then I'll choose my Pamela Smart, our customer service rep. We'll assign that to her, and it'll be in the new status, and that will show up in her business activity review instantly. The due date will be set, though, so she won't have to mess with it yet, but it will show up in that list, and then you can just close that out. Okay, so when I go back to the business activity, the original one, you'll see the link to the new business activity that I created. So they are cross-linked with each other, and you'll see that data on both business activities. Okay, so I'm going to move on, finish up, and I know I mentioned I'm going to just spend a little bit of time on the more advanced business activity tools. Scheduling, I think, is the next most popular tool, and then we'll do the billing wizard for service companies kind of at the end and wrap it up from there. So scheduling can be a little intimidating at first. I started with a real simple, this is the demo company, it doesn't have much data. But if you've used business activities for a long time and you have a lot of open activities, this may be a bit overwhelming. So I'm going to show you a couple of things you can do with it to make it easier to use. Number one is you can define a class of business activity types. So you can group different activity types such as sales and service and marketing. So you can have multiple activity types. So you can set this up where you only want to see service activities, and that will get all your administrative work and all your sales opportunities off the board. So now I'm only looking at service, which I think is a good tool, a good way to use this. You can also filter by due date. So you don't want to see all the future activities for Pamela Smart. If I went out next month, you'll see the follow-up from the RMA. But it's actually not due yet, so we don't want to show that yet. You can set the auto refresh to be 1 minute. That's fine. There's no auto refresh, and then obviously you're probably going to want to default to incomplete tasks only. So over here on the right, I have a list of every ACCTivate user that has been defined to be a accept service requests. So in configuration management, in your users list, there's actually a permission that says, available for service requests. I really didn't look at that yesterday. I need to go back and get the exact wording, but in configuration management, you'll need to define who your service reps are. Once you've done that, you can also pin, P-I-N, certain requests. So if you've got 15 guys and you're working with Pamela and the outsourcing team, we can actually hit the little blue pin, and that will lock those in the list on the left side. And there will be a scroll bar horizontally to see all the other reps. So this is just a list of all the tasks that are either due by today or overdue for these reps. Over on the far left, we have a list of business activity tasks that are not assigned to a rep. So the way you reassign things is very simple. It's a lot easier than drop downs. You just click and drag, drag and drop. So you can click the activity and you can drag and drop it into one of the user's assigned tasks. So in this case, I want to give it to Pamela Smart. and that will put it in sequence at the bottom of her list. Now you can move these items and adjust the sequence, the follow-up sequence within the scheduling board. So you can grab this one and move it below here, and it will resequence it for the board. That doesn't technically affect the promise date. The promise date on this one was still May 5th, but it lets you resort priorities above and beyond the dates that have been predefined. You also have a couple tools such as mapping, so you can actually view a map for any activity that's selected. Hit the view map, that goes right back to Google Maps as I showed you earlier. You also have a variety of buttons here for each status code that's available for that activity type. So as I switch to different activity types, this toolbar will adjust based on the types that are available for this type. I'm sorry, the statuses that are available for that type. So it's a single click shortcut to change the status. Right now is needs more information, but I can change it quickly to will call back. Just by clicking the button, it will change it to will call back, and then it shows the date and time that status change was made. Okay. So again, it's kind of an advanced tool for that. You've got icons for the codes. You have icons for the statuses, so you can just at a quick glance you can tell that a callback is a phone icon. Pretty easy. This one here is pending. Will call back as a phone. You'll see that status code. So again, you can resort things here, and you can also send email messages to the assigned person, Pamela Smart in this case, from the service request. So if I hit send message, it will start. I don't have her email set up. Forgot to do that. But if you set up your users' emails in configuration management under users, it will predefine the message, and it will automatically link the activity to this email message. And then I can use, of course, one of my message templates, and you can define any templates you want. Okay, so it's an easy way to send messages, change statuses, and view all the activities for many, many users. Or I'm sorry, on this low resolution presentation right now, you've got about 5. On a nice 1080p 23-inch monitor, you can probably view I think almost double. I think you can do 7 or 8 at a time. So get a big monitor if you're doing this. Okay, so we can close out of that. The billing wizard, kind of just to end on that, and then we'll go through a couple closing topics. So business activity wizard, when I do a activity that's for service or for anything that we're going to put time and materials on, I can actually just choose the annual service. This is an annual service call. I can go straight to the time tab, and I can add time and materials to be billed or not even billed, just to track my time to that customer. So there are a couple requirements here. Number one is the business activity must be linked to a customer. If it's linked to multiple customers, the one that will be billed has got to be checked as primary. So it's a really key aspect here. So when we add the time, the next thing is this is the date of the employee's time entry. And then here I'm going to choose an employee. Now, there's something a little different. We keep talking about activate users, but on the time tab, these are actually employees from QuickBooks or from SIMA if you're a SIMA user. So this allows an activate user, an administrator or manager, to record time expended from service reps who may not be activate users. So this will be your complete employee list, even if you've only got 5 or 10 activate users. Of course, we do recommend that your service reps use activate, but they don't have to. Then you have your labor items. Labor items are products, so you will set those up on the product screen, but it's actually, they need to be set up as labor as the item type. And those item types will dictate your rates. So, the rate for a laborer is very different than a supervisor or a foreman. So, or different types of technicians. So we'll put that in. The time entry, this is in terms of hours. So 1 is 1 hour. If you want to do 1 hour and 15 minutes, you don't do 1.15. You actually do 1 1/4. So this is, the way we do it here. It's like the way our consultants work. It is billable hours 1.25. So this does not take hours and minutes. It is always hours. Well, it's any unit of measure you define, but I'd recommend you use hours. I think that's the most basic way to do it. You could do minutes, of course, but it's a little more complicated. Then we have 3 standard billing options. One is standard, which means we bill the customer and they see the actual work performed. Then we have no charge, NC, which means we show the customer the work performed on the invoice, but we actually discount it 100%. So we actually show the time spent, but it's not billed at the rate. And then lastly, we have non-billable, NB. Non-billable means we do not even show the customer the time spent. Just as a little insight in the way we do business, we actually use non-billable for the majority of work performed in our service department. So when you call our team, they record time entries on every call, even actually writing up emails and doing remote support. We actually use non-billable for all of that time. And it lets us analyze how much time we're spending on each type of work and type of project. And again, we use the resolution codes and the codes to further report on what type of time entry we're doing. Tax is a little complicated. Most companies are not doing tax for labor in the U.S., but you do have that if you're doing it as a part of a package sale. The tax code comes from the product record. So set up the labor code and you'll dictate the default tax handling. Reference can just be used for any short code. I think it's 20 characters. So what we do, just as a suggestion, we actually will put in like a code, like a labor code or something simple. In addition to labor item, you might say, rework. And then the work description is really important. That becomes the special instructions on the service order. So fixed up the problem. Very simple. Now the default simple entry mechanism is a one-line grid. You have some advanced ways of viewing this. The two-line grid adds in the labor item description, also advanced pricing. So if we have special price rates for the labor codes, you can get to that. You can also view the hourly rate, $25 an hour, and you'll see the total dollar amount as well, $31.25. Again, if you mark that as no charge, it will actually do 100% discount. No bill is also 100% discount. So let's switch that back to standard, and we're done with that. So I can put two time entries in. Let's say I had two people. We had Tom Miller, and we also had Sam Smith. And Sam Smith is a supervisor, and he only spent 30 minutes. So that's 0.5 hours, and that's $35 an hour. He's a little more expensive. Okay. And then during the work, I don't want to actually enter a sales order for shipping product. I just want to quickly record the materials used out of our inventory. So I can come in here, and I can record the fact that blue tempera paint was used. And we used 3 gallons of the paint. And I can put any reference codes, that sort of thing as well. And I can choose any item that's in our inventory. Let's make sure I use the right warehouse here. I can add buttons. I can add multiple items here just to make that real simple. If I switch the two-line grid, you'll see what these items are. And in this case, we had some black buttons and a cordless phone we used to resolve this problem. So now I have time and materials. So from this point, I want to create not a sales order, not a sales quote, which we can still do, but in this case, I actually want to build this. So I'm going to choose service order, and that will automatically create a service order for the customer, and it will have the labor items first, and the rates, and any notes and instructions and reference codes, and then it'll also have the parts, the P lines, the parts. So we have the charges and the parts, and if and I'm doing work for someone who's on credit hold. Should have approved that. And if I print the service order, you'll see just kind of that information here. It's pretty simple. It just looks like a regular sales order. But we also have some other forms, which is time and material split. So if you do, and this is just a standard, you can customize this as well, but this might actually show the labor items in the total labor and the total materials for the job. So $95.25. Okay. When we create an invoice, again, you get a separate invoice format for service called service invoice, or you can do the time and material split out, and you can set the defaults in configuration management under order options. And so we're done. So we record the time and materials very quickly. I know I rushed through that, but it's pretty easy actually. And we choose the customer, and we add the time and materials, and we build the customer for those items. And if we go and we drill down and we look at that button item on the transactions tab, you will see that it was pulled out of our inventory as a sale, and it brought 3 buttons out at 10 cents a piece. So it will be linked to the order in the invoice. If you drill down, you will see it's a service order, not a sales order, but more or less it's the same as a sales order. It pulls it out of inventory. Okay, got a lot of windows up here. I'm going to try to get back to where we were. So I guess to wrap up, we've gone through most of the basics on business activities. There's a lot of different uses, such as service, sales, customer service, service work, repair service, and there's also customer service. And then there's also a lot of other opportunities you can use. We use it as well within our company for sales opportunities. So we actually use a business activity for a lead, and that's one thing you can look into. Although I still recommend you use our quote system and actually set up a customer record, which you will need eventually once you get the business. So there's a lot of options you can use. Hopefully I gave you kind of a good introduction to it, and maybe you got you to start thinking about it. And definitely follow up with us if you've got any questions, or you need some ideas, or you want to bounce some ideas off of us. We've used business activities within our company for many years, and we've had 20, 30 different types of activities over time. And we know what works and what doesn't work. But the main thing is anything that's more than just a single task or a simple task where you want to track multiple notes, any email messages, potentially do billings or returns, and you want to tie it all together, the ACCTivate business activities are a really good tool for that. And thank you again for joining us, and I realize an hour and a half of your time is a lot to ask, and we really appreciate you taking the time today to join us. And again, you can find all the ACCTivate webinars online at www.acctivate.com/webinars plural. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon.